The four-note motive, short, 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 long, is presented in the B part of the scherzo, and here it is stated very emphatically. The scherzo itself is rather quiet and rather playful, but the B section of the scherzo is played by the brass instruments, and this motive is blasted out in the melody. Ba-ba-ba-bom, 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 ba-ba-ba-bom. And it is quite clear that the composer wants you to hear the presentation of that four-note rhythmic motive. Now the movement is called a scherzo, which means a joke, and here Beethoven shows us something of his witty side, and we can certainly see this in the trio section. The trio section of this joke movement uses the most serious type of music that there is, that is a fugal exposition. But here this fugue is presented first perfectly normally. You hear it in the basses, the tenors, the alto, and the soprano in a very orderly fashion. But the second time around it begins with false starts. The subject begins, it stops. It begins again, it stops, and finally it takes off. In this movement, as in the second movement of this composition, the composer keeps his audience on its toes because he introduces a long transition at the end of this work. A minuet in trio movement would have concluded with the A prime section. A scherzo in trio movement, as Beethoven is using it here, has a sort of a coda at the end of it, and here it is a very long coda, and it is an extremely quiet coda. In fact, although he blasted out the B section of the scherzo at the beginning of the movement in the A section, here he presents it very quietly in the A prime section and then launches into a rather long, suspenseful transition. And instead of stopping, the movement continues on and it is connected to the fourth movement. And there probably is a good reason for this. Beethoven probably intended to surprise his audience, and that's exactly what happens, because the third movement is extremely quiet and the fourth movement is extremely loud. He, like Haydn, was probably making sure that everyone was awake for the ending of the symphony. The fourth movement also presents us with some interesting details. Here the motive, short, 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 long, is presented in the second theme of the movement. Ba-ba-ba-bom, ba-ba-ba-bom, ba-ba-ba-bom. And that is in fact the theme that he chooses to fragment and to develop in the development section of the movement. So you will hear more of the second theme in the development than you will hear of the first theme in the development. Again, I think it's quite obvious that Beethoven wants you to know that he has used that rhythmic motive and he draws your attention to it in this way. The retransition in the development is really striking because it contains an echo of the B part of the scherzo. Remember that the B part of the scherzo is the part of the scherzo that states the rhythmic motive. Ba-ba-ba-bom, 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 and so on. But here it is presented very slowly and very quietly. It's a very suspenseful section, and you can tell here that he is preparing you for a return to the musical ideas presented in the exposition. Here's a nice clear-cut example of a retransition. Also, although I have not noted it on the slide here, please take the opportunity that you have when you hear the coda of this movement to see how Beethoven keeps his audience on its toes. Here there are a number of occasions on which you think the movement is going to come to an end, and just as soon as you think it's going to stop, he cranks up the music and keeps it going on again and again. Clearly, he was out to entertain his audiences in this movement by keeping them guessing.